The millionaire's daughter was dying in a police cell, and nobody knew who she really was. Maya Johnson begged for her life as Officer Richard's boot crushed her windpipe, calling her every racist slur in the book. Above the city, her father watched a live feed, his finger hovering over a button that would unleash hell on earth. By morning, Richards would discover his wife missing, his bank account emptied, and his darkest secrets plastered across every billboard in America. Retry. Maya's fingers traced the hospital badge clipped to her scrubs as she walked through the empty parking garage. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that danced across the concrete walls. Her 12-hour shift had drained every ounce of energy from her body, but nothing could have prepared her for what waited in the darkness. The sound of slow footsteps echoing behind her made her heart skip a beat. Someone was following her. Officer Richards emerged from behind a concrete pillar, his hand resting on his weapon with predatory confidence. Well, what do we have here? He sneered, his eyes scanning Maya from head to toe like she was prey. The badge on his chest gleamed under the harsh lighting, but the darkness in his soul was far more terrifying than any shadow. Maya's instincts screamed danger, but she had nowhere to run. The elevator doors had already closed behind her. "Is there a problem, officer?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. She knew that tone, that look. She'd seen it before in the faces of men who believed her existence was a crime. Richard circled her slowly, like a shark sensing blood in the water, his radio crackling with distant chatter from the precinct. But what Maya didn't know was that every word, every movement, was being recorded by cameras she couldn't see. 40 floors above the city, Alexander Cross sat in his penthouse office, his eyes glued to the security monitors that covered every inch of Atlanta. The tech mogul had built an empire worth $50 billion. But tonight his wealth felt meaningless as he watched his daughter face the monster he'd spent years trying to protect her from. His finger hovered over his phone. One call could end this nightmare, but revealing Maya's identity would put her in even greater danger. Richards grabbed Maya's wrist with brutal force, his fingers digging into her skin like steel claws. "You people need to learn your place," he hissed, dragging her toward a patrol car parked in the shadows. Maya's medical training kicked in as she assessed her injuries. Bruised ribs, possible fracture in her left arm, but her mind raced faster than her pulse. The camera mounted on the officer's dash wasn't recording, and she realized this wasn't a random encounter. It was a planned execution. The back seat of the police car reeked of fear and desperation from previous victims who never made it home. Richard slammed the door with such violence that the entire vehicle shook, trapping Maya inside a metal cage that felt smaller with every passing second. Through the bulletproof glass, she watched him make a phone call, his lips moving in animated conversation with someone who clearly shared his twisted agenda. Maya pressed her face against the window, searching desperately for any sign of help. But the parking garage had become her tomb. Alexander Cross's hands trembled as he watched his daughter disappear into the darkness. The tracking device he'd secretly placed in her hospital badge, now his only connection to her. For 24 years, he'd hidden the truth from Maya, that she was the heir to the Cross fortune, adopted as an infant to protect her from enemies who would use her as leverage against him. Now those same protective instincts that made him conceal her identity were the very thing preventing him from saving her life. The patrol car pulled into the abandoned warehouse district where screams echoed unheard and justice died in silence. Richards whistled a cheerful tune as he dragged Maya from the vehicle, her legs barely supporting her weight after the brutal ride through Atlanta's darkest streets. Inside the warehouse, she saw the implements of torture laid out like surgical instruments. This wasn't his first victim, and it wouldn't be his last unless someone intervened. The concrete floor felt like ice against Maya's cheek as Richard's boot connected with her spine, each impact sending shockwaves of agony through her trembling body. "Scream louder," he commanded, his voice dripping with sadistic pleasure as he reached for the cattle prod hanging from his belt. Maya bit down hard on her tongue, refusing to give him the satisfaction. But when the electricity coursed through her nervous system, her resolve shattered like glass. What she didn't know was that her father had just activated every resource at his disposal. Mercenaries, hackers, and federal agents were already mobilizing across the city. Blood pooled beneath Maya's broken fingernails as she clawed desperately at the warehouse floor, trying to crawl toward the exit that seemed miles away. Richard circled her like a vulture, savoring every whimper that escaped her lips, completely unaware that satellite imagery was tracking his every movement. The billionaire's daughter had never felt more powerless, her medical degree and years of saving lives meaning nothing in this chamber of horrors. But in a control room downtown, Alexander Cross was orchestrating the most expensive rescue operation in American history. The warehouse door exploded inward with the force of military-grade explosives, flooding the space with blinding white light and the thunder of combat boots. Richard spun around in confusion as black-clad figures poured through the smoke, their faces hidden behind tactical masks that reflected his terror back at him. Maya's vision blurred as she watched her tormentor raise his hands in surrender, but the lead operative's voice cut through the chaos with surgical precision. Alexander Cross sends his regards. Richard's face drained of all color as the operative removed his mask, revealing features that looked eerily familiar. The same eyes, the same determined jawline that Maya inherited from the father she'd never known. "You made one fatal mistake," the man said, his voice carrying the weight of unlimited resources and bottomless rage. The corrupt officer's legs buckled as he realized he hadn't been torturing some random black woman. He'd been destroying the most protected person in America. The revelation hit Richards like a freight train as Alexander Cross stepped into the warehouse, his $1,000 suit contrasting sharply with the blood-stained concrete beneath his feet. 24 years ago, I adopted a beautiful baby girl and gave her a normal life to protect her from monsters like you, he said, kneeling beside Maya's broken body. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. He'd tortured the daughter of the man who could buy and destroy entire countries with a single phone call. The billionaire's eyes burned with fury that could melt steel as he cradled Maya's unconscious form. Within minutes, the warehouse transformed into a mobile hospital as Cross's private medical team worked frantically to stabilize Maya's injuries. Richards watched in horror as machines worth more than his annual salary monitored every heartbeat, every breath, every sign of life in the woman he'd tried to kill. "She's a trauma surgeon," Cross whispered to his daughter's unconscious form. "She saved hundreds of lives, and you nearly took hers because of the color of her skin." The corrupt officer's handcuffs felt tighter with each word, but his real punishment hadn't even begun. Cross stood slowly, his movement calculated and predatory, as he approached a man who'd shattered his world in a single night. "You want to know what happens when someone hurts my family?" he asked, his voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. Richards tried to speak, but terror had stolen his voice as Cross pulled out his phone and showed him a live feed from his own home. On the screen, federal agents were leading Richard's wife and children out in handcuffs, their faces streaked with tears and confusion about why their world was suddenly collapsing. The warehouse fell silent, except for the steady beep of Maya's heart monitor as Cross delivered the killing blow. "Your wife has been charged with money laundering. Your children are being expelled from their private schools, and every bank account in your family's name has been frozen pending investigation," he said, each word delivered with surgical precision. Richards collapsed to his knees as a reality hit him. In trying to destroy one black woman, he awakened a sleeping giant who would now systematically dismantle everything he'd ever loved. Maya's eyes fluttered open in the sterile brightness of Cross Memorial Hospital's private wing, the same facility where she worked countless night shifts without knowing her father owned every brick and beam. The morphine coursed through her veins, dulling the physical pain, but nothing could numb the psychological trauma of Richard's torture session. As her vision cleared, she saw a man sitting beside her bed, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit, with eyes that mirrored her own in ways that made her heart race with impossible recognition. "Who are you?" she whispered, though something deep in her soul already knew the answer would change everything. Alexander Cross took his daughter's hand with the gentleness of a man who'd waited 24 years for this moment, his thumb tracing the same small scar on her knuckle that he'd kissed when she was just 3 months old. "My name is Alexander Cross, and I'm the man who should have protected you from monsters like Richards," he said, his voice breaking with decades of suppressed emotion. Maya's medical training kicked in as she studied his facial features, the genetic similarities too obvious to ignore, but her heart wasn't ready for the tsunami of questions crashing through her mind. The adoption papers he placed on her bedside table would either give her a family or destroy the identity she'd built her entire life around. Outside Maya's hospital room, Richard sat shackled in a federal holding cell, watching news reports that painted him as the face of police brutality, while his life disintegrated in real time. His mortgage had been called in, his pension dissolved, and every media outlet in America was broadcasting footage of a savage attack on an innocent black woman. But Cross's revenge was just beginning. The billionaire had purchased Richard's hometown newspaper, his children's school, and even the church where his wife sought sanctuary. Every institution that had once protected the corrupt officer was now a weapon aimed directly at his heart. Maya struggled to process the impossible reality that the man she'd spent years hating for abandoning her had actually been protecting her from a world where billionaires' children became targets for kidnapping, extortion, and murder. Cross pulled up security footage on his tablet, showing her the army of bodyguards who'd secretly shadowed her through medical school, the background checks run on every person she'd ever dated, the investigators who quietly eliminated threats she never knew existed. "I gave you a normal life because I wanted you to become the woman you chose to be, not the heiress the world expected," he explained, tears streaming down his face as Maya's anger slowly transformed into understanding. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Richards faced a judge who would decide his fate. Unaware that Cross had quietly influenced the selection process to ensure justice would be served with surgical precision, Maya sat in the front row, her scars hidden beneath makeup, but her strength radiating like a beacon as she prepared to confront the monster who tried to break her spirit. Richard's own lawyer seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone for messages that never came. Cross had purchased a law firm and reassigned their best attorneys to other cases. When the prosecutor stood to present evidence, the first exhibit was crystal clear footage of Richard's savage attack, recorded by cameras the corrupt officer never knew existed. Maya's testimony electrified the packed courtroom as she described every moment of her torture with the clinical precision of a surgeon and the raw emotion of a survivor. Officer Richards didn't see a nurse who'd saved lives, a daughter who'd earned her way through medical school, or a human being deserving of dignity, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. The jury hung on every word as she detailed how Richards had used racial slurs while breaking her ribs, how he'd laughed while she begged for mercy, how he'd promised that no one would care about another dead black woman. But Maya's secret weapon was a man sitting behind her, a father whose love had given her strength she never knew she possessed. Richard's world collapsed further when the prosecution revealed his pattern of abuse, presenting evidence of 7 other victims who'd suffered similar torture at his hands over the past decade. Cross's private investigators had tracked down every woman Richards had brutalized, providing them with the best legal representation money could buy and the courage to speak their truth in open court. The corrupt officer's face went ashen as victim after victim took the stand, their testimonies painting him as a serial predator who'd hidden behind his badge while terrorizing innocent people. His wife filed for divorce via courthouse papers that morning, taking their children to a location Cross's security team would keep forever secret. The judge's gavel fell like thunder as she sentenced Richards to 40 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, her words echoing through the courtroom like a death knell for corruption in law enforcement. Maya felt her father's hand squeeze her shoulder as justice was finally served. But Cross's ultimate revenge was yet to be revealed. He'd purchased a private prison where Richards would spend the rest of his life, ensuring that every day would be a reminder of the night he'd tortured the wrong woman's daughter. Outside the courthouse, Maya faced the cameras for the first time as Cross's heir, her message simple but powerful. Evil hides behind badges, but love and money can move mountains when they fight together.